Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear.
Heavens to Murgatroyd!
He likes it! He likes it!
Saturday morning cartoons were awesome. From the 1960s through the 1990s, we kicked off each weekend in a frenzy of animation that is unmatched today.
But were these shows actually any good? Join us as we dig into the history of your favorite and not so favorite Saturday morning cartoons, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of each one, and determine if our nostalgia matches the reality when it comes to these tunes.
So stay in your PJs, grab a bowl of cereal, and settle in. I'm John.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
So John.
Yeah.
We're both sports fans. We both love athletics and we into our teams. But I think one of the big appeals nationwide, worldwide, globally with sports is the way that events and moments can like bring people together, or they just trigger those memories that everybody remembers. You think about Christian Laettner hitting the game winner against Kentucky in the Final Four.
I remember that because I lost money on that.
Well, and everybody has a different reason for remembering these things.
Right.
Henry Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's home run record. You've got the Miracle on Ice. And then
Believe in Miracles. Yeah.
When Dastardly Dalton went sailing over the finish line in the swim relay to
who can forget that
first victory for the really Rottens ever in the Laff-A-Lympics. Seminal moments all, but we remember these things.
Do you remember where you were when?
Exactly.
Yeah, I was sitting on the carpet in my living room floor with a bowl of Fruit Loops, staring at the TV screen, raptured that Dastardly was actually going to win.
Shocked, I tell you.
Yeah, shock and awe, for sure. So we're talking about the storied history of the Laff-A-Lympics. And the Laff-A-Lympics were kind of a spin-off of the Battle of the Network Stars, which back in the 70s and 80s, you had 3 channels. Right. And when Battle of the Network Stars was on, it was an event that you looked forward to for weeks. So when they made this cartoon version, Laff-A-Lympics, it had that appeal to it, that this is a big deal. This is something exciting and new.
Is the idea of seeing like your favorite, well, in this case, characters, but favorite actors in roles outside of what you normally see them in. That was just
and you get to see them as people and not as that character. Mm-hmm. To see your cartoon and you expect them to act a certain way, but now they're pole vaulting, which just kind of makes it interesting. So the Battle of the Network Stars, there 8 to 10 actors from different networks formed teams and competed in basically Olympic events. Swimming, kayaking, running, tug of war. When you see Mr. Cotter run the 400, who can look away from that?
Well, you think of the 70s outfits too, with the short shorts and the
Oh yeah, they had the Larry Bird shorts on and the tall socks and everything. And the cartoon version in the Laff-A-Lympics by Hanna-Barbera, they had 45 characters, not just 3 teams. So that format was similar, made up of protagonists from the various shows over the last 20 years of cartoons, and a third team of villainous foils, the bad guys. And some of them they even created for the show because they didn't have enough bad guys. In Scooby-Doo, for example, there was a different bad guy every show, usually the amusement park manager, but it was someone different every time.
Well, and then they were all hauled away by the police and they weren't coming back. So
yeah, they were in jail because those meddling kids put them away. So they created some characters for this, and then all of our favorite characters that you wanted to see and you wanted to see succeed and you wanted to see them beat the bad guys. And the show ran for 2 seasons from 1977 to 1978.
Technically, it was 79 because that second season, the animation schedule ran 78 to 79. But all the new episodes from that season all had debuted by the end of December of 78.
Okay, yeah. And still being enjoyed on YouTube and other places and at your local library.
That first season consisted of 16 episodes and the second featured 8. So there's a total of 24 episodes of cutthroat competition.
Yeah, did they run out of ideas? I wonder why the second season was half as long as the first.
Well, I think after the end of it, and you realize they've traveled the globe, there's really nowhere they hadn't, significance that they hadn't gone. It feels like it kind of ran its course after 24 episodes, and
Yeah. Well, that is the neat thing too about animation is there's no location fees, right? So if you want to have the competition in Rome, you can have it in Rome. And if you want to have it on the moon, you can have it on the moon, which kind of kept it fresh and interesting because they also kind of based some of the events on the locale and touched on some of the culture of where they were. Not always good, not always bad, but pointed, gave a little nod to the culture of where they were.
Yeah, it always kind of fit the locale, which is kind of a neat touch to it. So yeah, the Laff-A-Lympics was part of a 2-hour animation block that debuted in 1977. It was called Scooby's All-Star Laff-A-Lympics, and it included Laff-A-Lympics, the Scooby-Doo Show, Blue Falcon and Dynomutt, Captain Caveman, and the Teen Angels. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to call him Captain America at least twice, probably, as we talk. I just can't help myself.
I can't say that character's name without saying it like he says it. In my head, I always hear Captain Caveman.
Yeah, I don't think my voice could do that very much. So do that gravelly call.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last segment of it was Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, which was just reruns of the classic show. They did a second season. They repackaged it. So instead of 2 hours, they trimmed it down to a svelte 90 minutes. And of course, to fit that time frame, they cut out the Blue Falcon and Dynomutt segments. And also they got rid of the Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Reruns, put it under a new name of Scooby's All-Stars. So slightly new looks, slightly revamped, but overall pretty much the same setup.
In a 90-minute block back then was a lot. That was a big chunk of the schedule.
Yeah, well, and
because your Saturday morning cartoons, you could watch all morning until your mom kicked you out of the house, right? You can't sit in front of TV forever to melt your brain, So 90 minutes, sometimes it felt like it was half the morning was the Scooby-Doo block.
Yeah, it was like a day of animation, like all packed in. But I mean, and we're looking at 1977. I mean, this is like the zenith of Hanna-Barbera's domination of Saturday mornings. At this point, they were between 70 to 80% of all content on Saturday mornings was produced out of the Hanna-Barbera studios. So they were churning it out.
That's crazy.
And so that was through the 70s, most of the 70s, that was Hanna-Barbera's maiden time. And then once the 80s hit, at some point we'll get to that, but that's when the decline hit. But this is them at their peak.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So the majority of the characters from both the Scooby-Doobies and the Yogi Yahooies, the two protagonist teams, they were already established in previous cartoons, as you said earlier, over the previous 20 years. So you had the Yogi Yahoo.
Yeah, we knew who they were already.
Exactly, and that was
we had a good relationship with these people already.
And that was the appeal of them, right? It was like, and they're all together. That's so cool. But the Yogi Yahooies were primarily the characters from what we would consider Hanna-Barbera's golden age, from like the late 50s through the 60s. They actually mostly the 50s. Obviously Yogi Bear, Boo Boo Bear, Cindy Bear, Yacky Doodle. They were all from the Yogi Bear cartoon. Huckleberry Hound had his own show, and that included Pixie, Dixie, and Mr. Jinx, and also Hokey Wolf. And then there's a Quick Draw McGraw show, which included Snooper and Blabber, and then Augie Doggy and Daddy Doggy, all members of the Scoobies. And then that team was rounded up by Wally Gator, and then Grape Ape, the great Grape Ape. So Grape Ape is interesting. This was the only character from post 1962. So those are all the 50s and 60s characters. And then there's this big purple gorilla
who can only say Grape Ape.
And we'll get into how he was kind of underused.
Yes, criminally underused. I mean, you've got a 20-foot gorilla on your team. It's going to be hard to lose some of these events, but you got to put him in the game.
Yeah. So then the other protagonists would be the Scooby-Doobies, captained by Scooby-Doo and then Shaggy. You had Speed Buggy and Tinker from the Speed Buggy show, Dynomutt and Blue Falcon, Babu from the Genie Show, which was a animated take on I Dream of Jeannie, the Hong Kong Phooey from the Hong Kong Phooey Show, and then Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, consisting of Taffy Chance, Dee Dee Sykes, and Brenda Dare. So interesting enough, this was Captain Caveman's debut from this animation block. So he debuted in the Laff-A-Lympics and then had his cartoon show up right after that.
Yeah, so you wonder, was he part of Laff-A-Lympics and then got his own show, or was the intent to have his own show but put him on Laff-A-Lympics to get him a little more exposure?
Well, it's funny because he was not supposed to be part of Laff-A-Lympics originally. That was the debut for that. They put out some drawings and cells, and they included members from Josie and the Pussycats, another Hanna-Barbera creation. But because they were owned by Archie Comics, they had copyright issues. And so the four characters that they want to include, which are Melody, Alexander, Alexandra, and Sebastian the Cat and they actually had two cartoons. There's Josie and the Pussycats and then Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space, which is logical transition, right?
Sure.
But
so it's the beginning of the space age.
So since they couldn't get those characters, they naturally had these other characters, these three teenage girls and a hairball with a
caveman,
at the ready to take their place. So
yes,
and
he carried a club.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, they had one other team member who was supposed to be there, and that was Jeannie, who would have been from the Jeannie cartoon. Again, copyright issues, this time with Columbia Pictures Television. They couldn't get her usage, so they could still use Babu because he was created by Hanna-Barbera for the Genie cartoon. So for better or worse, he was part of the show, but no Genie. So
and I remember wondering why, when you're a little kid, you don't know about contracts and all this stuff, and thank goodness, right? But I remember, where is Genie? Why isn't she here? Because she could just blink and nod her head, and they would win a lot.
A competent magician as opposed
to... So we get Babu, who's kind of a clown. He doesn't really get things. He doesn't. Things don't always go his way.
Yeah, he kind of lucks into his magic working here and there. So
right,
but yet
it works in spite of him.
Yeah, but yet he's not the worst magic user on the show. So,
which is amazing.
Yes. Which brings me to the really rotten. So it's funny, they actually intended to use Dick Dastardly and Muttley from the Wacky Races as the main members of this team. Again, copyright issues, this time with Heater Quigley production. So Dick Dastardly and Muttley were both members of the Wacky Races. Because they were co-owned, Hanna-Barbera did not think they had the rights to use them. So some of my research, it's not clear that they may have actually had the rights to use them. They just weren't sure, and probably were so beaten down after trying to get the other ones and couldn't get them. They just said, let's just move forward. So
we'll just make a lookalike.
Which they did. So, and they already had a lookalike, interestingly enough, for Muttley. They had a character named Mumbly. So looked identical. They wore slightly different outfits. They're slightly
Trench
different
coat.
Colored. And that was pretty much the difference. But
that's all they had to do.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, so Mumbly was a protagonist in his own show, The Mumbly Show, and he was a detective, solve crimes.
Sure.
And they actually had to do a little heel turn, make him go bad, so he could head up the bad guys. And
right. And you'd think, as a former detective, he'd be better at cheating. He'd know how to cover up his tracks. I also wonder what would make a detective go bad. Is it the classic detective story where he's alienated his family because he gets so involved in the cases and he started drinking and, he's like, oh, I can't handle this anymore. I'm leaving the force. I'm going to be a bad guy now.
Didn't pay.
I would love to see the whole backstory on Mumbly.
It's hard work being a private eye. It's easier to just be a crook, I guess. Yeah. So they had the team up, obviously no Dick Dastardly. So they created a Dick Dastardly lookalike, and that's in the Dread Baron. Again, looks just like him, sounds just like him, is not him. But
not him
is essentially Dick Dastardly.
Yes, they're not fooling anybody.
No,
except for the lawyers.
And so obviously Muttley was pre-existed. The only other characters from the Rottens who pre-existed in a way were the Dalton brothers. So you had Dinky, who is a pituitary gland gone crazy.
Yeah, and then, huge.
Yeah, and then his two, as he calls them, the little brothers. Dirty and Dastardly, who literally can fit in the palm of his hand.
Yeah. and they're like hillbillies, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they're kind of a weird cross between a hillbilly and an Old West bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of like this nebulous, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah, just not good people.
Right. Really rotten.
Really rotten.
But so they actually appeared in Huckleberry Hound cartoons. Yeah, I think 2 cartoons from Huckleberry Hound originally looked vastly different. They looked more like the standard human characters from that period of Hanna-Barbera. And then just kind of disappeared. They came back for, I believe, one of the Quick Draw McGraw shows. Obviously, Quick Draw McGraw being a cowboy horse.
Yep.
You had to give him like a Old West, foils to go against. So the Dalton brothers had an existence. They just basically gave them a complete overhaul in terms of their look.
Yeah, this is the Old West version of the Dinky Gang.
Yeah. Yeah, they slightly more exaggerated size and style, but
Well, yeah, it was because they're standing next to a bipedal horse.
yeah.
You got to
As
be
you do.
big if your nemesis is a horse.
You make it sound like that's weird.
Yeah. Oh, that's what makes cartoons so much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I always wondered how Quick Draw McGraw was holding those guns with his hooves.
Well, it's just like Scooby-Doo, who had,
Yeah,
walks around if it's of opposable thumbs on his paws, but
right. The magic of animation.
Yeah. But everyone else.
So then they
go
they
ahead.
had to create some people for this, right? Because they didn't have enough bad guys, so they had to create some.
Kind of. They did create a couple that were brand new. That was the Great Fondue, who was, as the aforementioned, worse magician than Babu.
And I would say he's worse than the magician from the Frosty the Snowman cartoon.
Yeah, he's awful.
Yeah, he's really, really bad.
Yeah, he succeeds most when he pretends to use magic. But
Yeah, exactly.
and most of the time as his magic works, it just doesn't work the way he intends. But so yeah, he kind of sucks. And then he has his
It's
rabbit.
like the magic had its own moral compass. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this instead.
Well, and then they partnered him up with a rabbit, who is the creatively named Magic Rabbit, and
I love that.
And he had one line of dialogue throughout the series, and that was "brack." Used to comedic effect throughout, so it was just.
And he took the whole scene with that.
Yeah, it was a close up of his head saying "brack."
Yeah,
And
he
cut
filled
back
the
away.
screen as Brack.
So yeah, interesting. And then they also created Daisy Mayhem, and so she was a hillbilly wearing her cutoff shorts and her split end hair, and just a whole lot of no shoes, whole lot of attitude.
Yeah,
no shoes, but she had an eye patch wearing pig named Suey who did wear tennis shoes.
Yeah. So we need a sidekick for the hillbilly bad girl. Let's give her a pig with one eye.
Well, how do we make sure that he's rotten? Give him an eye patch. Give him a handicapped. Everybody will know he's evil then, right?
He's the bad guy because something went down where he lost an eye.
Yeah. And of course, then she won't wear shoes, but she's thoughtful enough to put them on her pig. So
yeah, he's got to wear the shoes. He's got to wear. If I'm not wearing the shoes, he'll wear them.
Now, so there were 4 other characters who filled out the Rottens roster, and those were the Creepleys: Mr. Creeply, Mrs. Creeply, Junior Creeply. Yeah, because I couldn't really give them real first names, and then Orphaloctopus.
So they're all from the same. It's a family, right? A family of 4.
Correct.
They're all related.
It's like a family of 3, and I assume their pet.
The octopus is their pet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did they come from?
So they were somewhat new. They were actually modeled after a pre-existing family, the Gruesomes, who debuted in the Flintstone cartoons. They actually showed up for a handful of cartoons in the Flintstones series as their neighbors. So just weird and quirky, very much in the Addams Family type of look. So just kind of, bad, evil slightly looking, but not really evil.
Yeah, just really strange.
Yeah.
So now you've got a family called the Creepleys, based on a family named the Gruesomes, that's based on the family called the Addams. Right? So you got the Addams family, who kind of become the Gruesomes, who kind of become the Creepleys to get to this Laff-A-Lympics.
And I love this is a quick side note too, that the Flintstones also had another set of neighbors called the Frankenstones later on, who are also very monstrous, but this time Munster-esque look with the Frankenstein father and the Bride of Frankenstein mother. Apparently that either their neighborhood or just the house next door was just really appealing to that lifestyle.
It comes with a dungeon. It's the only house on the market with a dungeon.
So those are the 3 teams, and then of course there's a few more characters that we'll touch on too. There's the color commentary provided through the show by Snagglepuss, the pink lion, who pretty much everybody knows. He again had his own segment in the Yogi Bear show, but everybody knows now, like, heavens to Murgatroyd, exit stage left.
Philosophizing even.
Yeah. And actually, I hope we get to his show because his cartoons actually are pretty funny.
Yes.
But we'll
he reminds me of Charles Nelson Riley. So Snagglepuss to me was always Charles Nelson Riley. Kind of had that attitude, like everything is wonderful and awesome. And even if something's going terribly wrong, he's still enjoying it. He's just loving life.
Well, you talk about those kind of those 70s game show staples like Charles Nelson Riley. So the other colored commentator was Mildew Wolf, who is a more obscure character. So he showed up in this short-lived show called the Chattanooga Cats, which was kind of like, if you can remember the Banana Splits type of, they had live action segments and then they put in cartoons to go with it. The Chattanooga Cats was supposed to be like that. So they had these 4 kind of hillbilly music playing cats, and then they would have like short little snippets, and then they'd cut to individual cartoons, one of which was a Mildew Wolf cartoon. And Mildew Wolf was just I'm going to catch that sheep and eat it.
Yeah.
Never succeeded, because then he'd run afoul of a sheepdog, and that would be the end of it. But
yeah, that's like the classic cat and mouse thing, and the mouse always outsmarts the cat.
Yeah, but to tie him to the game shows, so he was voiced uncredited by Paul Lynde, who was another staple from those game shows. He was very distinct voice, and so when they brought him into the Laff-A-Lympics, obviously John Stevenson was the actor who portrayed him, did his best Paul Lynde imitation. So it's very similar. So the voices, and when I first heard it, I like, what, did they get Paul Lynde to do this show? They did not. They
just
did previously.
Sound like
in 1969 they got him there for the Chattanooga Cats, but not for the Laff-A-Lympics.
It's so interesting that they couldn't use certain characters, but imitating someone's voice was okay. Oh, we can't afford Lynde. We'll just get somebody who sounds like Lynde.
Nobody knows. Of course, they did that a lot with some of the Scooby-Doos. You'd suddenly hear some random actor voice trying to, like, it'd be Peter Lorre from those old crime noir movies.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the final set of characters, there were some guest appearances. We mentioned the Flintstones before. Fred and Barney Rubble show up for a couple. They just show up and give their commentary, and they don't really add anything. They're just there. It's like
they don't compete. They just show up kind of like the ultimate cameo. They're so much better than everyone else. They just show up and like say what they need to say, and then they're out.
Then you also had Peter Potamus, who actually had his own show through Hanna-Barbera in the 1950s, kind of short-lived, but big purple hippopotamus who float around in a hot air balloon.
Yeah, and why not?
Yeah, it's because what else is he going to do?
Right.
And then you have Jabberjaw, he shows up more often, and he is clearly there to promote the Jabberjaw cartoon and that Jabberjaw brand for some reason. Because he's not there for any other reason.
No. And they didn't even enter him in the swimming events. Yeah. You've got a great white shark on your team.
I guess, and of course he only shows up at the water events. He's a shark who walks around on the land and plays in a band, but he's only there for the water events.
Well, and it's funny, he shows up in the fishing event when the really rottens accidentally catch him.
Well, yeah, we'll get to Daisy Mayhem's prowess as a competitor later, but that would be one of them where she did catch him at one point until he decided to eat the net that she caught him in.
Right.
But and then mentioning Daisy Mayhem, the only other characters who do show up, then there's her parents show up, Mumbly's mother shows up for a interview, and then also Orphle Octopus's parents show up in their own episode. So that kind of covers everybody who appears. And then I did want to add one more thing. So Laff-A-Lympics obviously ended 78, 79. The name reappeared in 2012 briefly as part of a direct-to-DVD video that was called Scooby-Doo Laff-A-Lympics Spooky Games. And so that was released to coincide with the London Olympics. and it was essentially a standalone Scooby-Doo episode. But the DVD actually, 12 episodes of the Laff-A-Lympics. So they kind of got back out there into the market in a roundabout way.
Yeah, take advantage of all the hype around the Olympics and put this back out there.
Yeah,
which parents understood, and the kids are like, "What is this?"
Yeah. And it's probably a little jarring because the cartoon has nothing to do with the Laff-A-Lympics. It's actually just a regular Scooby-Doo adventure.
Right.
I think a statue comes to life at the Olympic Games and is trying to stop a guy from breaking pole vault record.
Oh, sure.
How else would you do it than dress up as a giant statue? And, and then there's 12 of these episodes that were created 30 years prior that have nothing to do with it. So,
and characters like a lot of kids wouldn't recognize.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all new to them. So fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Robert, you can talk about some of the events they had. There were 93 total events through 2 seasons, mostly based on Olympic sports, a lot of races, and some fun scavenger hunts like put the bell on the Yeti when they're in the Himalayas. But most of the events were races. About 60% of the events were races. And 35 of those races involved some sort of motorized conveyance, whether it was a race car, a motorboat, swamp boat, an airplane. They even had a hot air balloon. You could call that motorized. Yeah, rickshaw races, dog sleds, hansom cab, chariot races. So yeah, a lot of races. And then a lot of events that were designed for a certain type of animal to compete in, whether it was a dog in the dog sledding or bronco busting. They did a fox hunt, hansom cab, pulled by a horse, chariots pulled by horses. So I always thought it was interesting, especially when they're doing the bronco busting, you've got Quick Draw McGraw standing there going, wait, what are they doing? They're riding horse, I just put myself in that character going, okay, I'm a horse and they're over there basically beating another horse into submission. And I'm okay with this.
Well, and I think there's at one point he rides a seahorse and says, well, I'm going to stick to riding horses on land. Like, well, yeah, but you are a horse. Why would you need to ride one?
Yeah. So just stuff like that, a lot of the characters are dogs, Scooby-Doo and Muttley, and they're going to have a dog sled race. So they don't choose the dogs to pull the dog sleds. They choose other animal characters to pull the dog sleds. And the fox hunt, I was surprised when I saw the fox hunt thing go down because, it's a pariah nowadays. You can't hunt fox like that. It's the poor animal, it's outnumbered and it's unfair. And plus you've got a wolf, which is a near cousin to the fox, commentating on the whole thing. But luckily the fox outsmarts everyone. And in that episode, none of the teams get points. They award all the points to the fox because the fox had tricked all of the teams to climb up a tree. So the fox had won that round. One of my favorite episodes was when they went to England. I talked about earlier, they used the local culture in a lot of these. So the events in England they had a climbing event, but it was climbing to the top of Big Ben. And so the Yogis entered Quick Draw McGraw, who was a horse. The Scoobies entered Shaggy, and the Rottens entered Dinky Dalton. So I'm looking at the 3 of these thinking Shaggy looks like a mountain climber, right? He's got the goatee, lives in a van, he's probably out in the mountains a lot.
He's lean. He doesn't have the excess.
Yeah, he's lean. He's like the Alex Honnold of the group, right? So I'm thinking he's going to rock this climbing thing. And Dinky Dalton, who's this huge man, and then Quick Draw McGraw, who is a horse. And I haven't seen horses climb before. And actually, the Rottens won that. Dinky Dalton was the first to the top. Shaggy finished 3rd, and Quick Draw McGraw squeezed in at 2nd place. I was surprised that Shaggy didn't do better in that, because when I started, I'm like, Shaggy's got this wrapped up, and he finishes dead last.
Well, as watching these, logic doesn't necessarily win out in almost any competition.
No, which makes it fun to watch because you never know.
Exactly.
Who's going to win? You think they're going to have this wrapped up, but it's not going to happen.
I think one of my favorite events is when they're in Norway and they do the Viking longboat race. So it's the whole team in each boat. And of course, the logic is, well, the yogis have a giant gorilla. They can just, he can just paddle, but they keep talking like, well, and so he sits in the boat and it's like half of it's up in the air. And he's just sitting there. He's not doing anything as they're rowing. And then they say, well, let's lift the sail and then just have him blow it. So he's blowing air and somehow moving the boat. The Rottens thwart that. And so then he finally, the thing that you think he should do right off the bat is put his hands in the water and start paddling the boat. Yeah. He does that and they win. Like, why don't you do that right at the beginning?
Some questionable coaching throughout.
It's the same with the dog sled race where Yaki Doodle, actually, they hitch him to a sled and they put the 40-foot tall gorilla in the sled and let this baby duckling try and pull him.
Again, when you've got the 400-pound or 400-foot gorilla on your team, you got to make better use of that.
There's really not a reason that you should lose anytime you use that gorilla, but yeah, and I think statistically he ended up getting five wins for them, which
just a solid contribution.
Yeah, it tied him for the most in the yogis. The other being Yogi Bear, which as the team captain you expect him to pull his weight, and he does. So.
Although I think they underused Cindy Bear. I think they held Cindy back.
100% agree.
The only legitimate athlete on that team.
Criminally underused. So yeah, what was my stat on that? Was she
4 wins, 10 episodes.
Yeah, only in 10 episodes. She competes in 4 events and she wins all 4.
Won all 4.
Yeah.
She's your ace.
Yeah. Why isn't she even on the show? Why isn't she even traveling with them, let alone competing all the time? But
yeah, you got to put Cindy in there.
Yeah.
When I watched these episodes and did some reading, did some research, what I found interesting was, what we've been talking about is there are events where clearly you have the right character that you're like, oh, you got to put Grape Ape in the tug of war because he's going to win, right? But they don't always do that.
Right.
And even when they do it, it doesn't go their way. But, the Really Rottens seemed to me that the Really Rottens always made the best coaching choice for competitor in that event. So, for example, in ping pong, Orphle Octopus is there with 8 paddles. You're not getting the ball past Orphle Octopus in the ping pong table. But then they also, when they did the moose sled race, used the Dread Baron because he's slight. He can be pulled by a sled. But then instead of using a moose, they dress up the Daltons disguised as a moose. So now you've got people dressed like a moose trying to pull another person. It just doesn't go well for them. The Yogi Yahuis, same thing. Good decision, bad decision. They entered Grape Ape into sumo wrestling. Hands down the winner.
He didn't win because
I know.
One of the few times, and this is what we'll get to this, but the Rottens, when they cheat, they lose. When they don't cheat, they win. So they send, their 2 short little Dalton brothers, Dirty and Dastardly, against this giant gorilla. They tickle him and they win.
Right. Yeah, without cheating.
It's a brilliant strategy, and it's
effective. And you're looking at this like, well, the ape is going to win the sumo, right? Because he's the obvious choice, and he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and if nothing else, you think you'd stick, Dinky Dalton against him, who's probably not going to win, guy. But physically could the best chance. And no, they have a better strategy.
Yeah, but then they don't like to win without cheating. The Scooby Doobies, their decisions that stood out to me were entering Quick Draw McGraw in gymnastics, but she doesn't seem like the most graceful character. And then in the antique airplane race, you've got the Blue Falcon, right? The Blue Falcon is a falcon. He's a superhero. He flies. Yeah. So who do they enter in the airplane race? Tinker and Speed Buggy.
So the Speed Buggy,
yeah, Speed Buggy is a car. Let's load him up into the antique airplane. See how that goes.
Well, Tinker can drive a car. He could probably just drive a plane just as well, right?
Well, he's got the goggles already, but he doesn't go anywhere without that car. So,
and he drives a car that drives himself. So how good can he be?
That's true. He's a passenger most times. He's like an onboard mechanic, is what he is.
Yeah, and then you've got the Blue Falcon, who actually flies his own plane.
Yes, but accomplished pilot.
Yeah, we let's not put him there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had our favorites, our favorite athletes, if we want to call them that. I was always impressed with Orphle Octopus's finesse. He was the finesse guy in the ping pong and the tightrope and really graceful. Grape Ape, pulling the Eiffel Tower down and capture the flag, was actually surprisingly good at treasure hunt. You think he's got a monkey brain. He's this giant ape, but he's actually pretty deductive when it came to the treasure hunt. I liked Captain Caveman because he always came with the Teen Angels, right? So if you enter Captain Caveman, you're getting 4 athletes instead of just 1.
Yeah, and they actually, as long as I think there's only one time he won without the assistance from the Teen Angels. It's the batting competition where he hits what?
Well, of course, he carries a club.
Yeah, that's his natural fit there. But I think otherwise, he claimed 9 victories, and
which was second most on their team, right?
Second most behind the Blue Falcon, who had 10, and the Teen Angels were assisted him in 7 of them.
7.
Yeah. So when they were teamed up with all together, they were successful.
Yes.
But when they weren't, it didn't go as well.
Didn't see? It's all the importance of a team.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, for the Scoobies, it was Blue Falcon. He had the most wins, and he just he seemed to handle the cheating from the Rottens a little bit better than everybody else, where he found ways to overcome, or just like, well, those dastardly villains, we'll get them next time. You just whatever.
Villains are gonna villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe it's from his years as a superhero. He's just used to this kind of behavior.
That's just an old hat dealing with villainy. It's like, whatever.
Right. What do you do? I deal with villainy.
Yeah. Now his so he would be my Scooby choice. My Yogis, far and away, hands down. We mentioned Cindy Bear already. Criminally underused. Clearly the best player on that team.
Absolutely.
And then for Rottens, actually, I had trouble picking between Daisy Mayhem and Dinky Dalton. When they weren't cheating, they actually were really good. Mm-hmm. And then when they were cheating, they tended to be more successful with their cheating attempts than everybody else.
They played a strong role in the cheating as well.
Yeah, so they had a hand in almost everything, and were tended to be pretty good about it. I think they each had Daisy Mayhem had 4 wins, and the Daltons had 4 wins. I kind of put all the Daltons together, but Dinky, because Dinky pretty much whatever he did, his brothers were involved in some way or another, and vice versa. So,
well, what about your least valuable players?
Oh yes, least valuable. Well, you'll notice one of the names we haven't mentioned at all is Hong Kong Phooey. What did he?
Right.
He only competed a couple of times.
I think it's when they were in China. Was he in any other ones?
He was in one more, and it's escaping me which one he was, but he didn't win. And you'd think he's karate. He's got
he's an athlete, superhero-ish.
Good movements. He's able to handle himself well. Not so much.
No, he was a pitcher, right? He was the Chinese pitcher in the batting contest. Yeah, and he had that funky wind up.
And he was in one of the races too. I believe it was early in the second season, and it didn't end well. But yeah, so he would have been my least valuable. For the Yogis, the Yogis are tough because they're saddled with a bunch of mice and cats who really didn't do a whole lot. Yeah. And of the useless mice and cats, I thought Blabbermouth is probably the worst. He really didn't compete much. He actually only had 2 lines in the entire series. So not only did he not compete, he didn't say anything. He didn't even talk.
Yeah. So what's he going to do? He's a mouse. It's clearly at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and he was involved with one victory, but that was with his partner Snooper from the Snooper and Blabber show. Mm-hmm. Snooper actually competed separately from Blabber. Blabber never competed without Snooper around him. So again, kind of bringing down his partner.
Yeah.
And then the Creepleys, this was an easy one. Mrs. Creepley, I should say for the Rottens, Mrs. Creepley was by far the least valuable. She sucked at everything.
Yeah, and she kind of had this air about her, like, yeah, I'm just here for the paycheck. She didn't really seem interested in competing. She did kind of enjoy cheating,
but she was terrible at it. Like those were the ones. Those are the ones where she'd be involved in the cheating, and it wouldn't affect anybody else. It would just screw themselves over.
But she was having a good time.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I get to do something rotten. Okay.
I think she pulled a prank on Mildew Wolf one time, and that was the only thing that worked. So
she had the long black tight dress, I mean, how is she going to compete in that outfit?
Yeah, well, and I think looking at the stats, she never got a victory. Junior Creepy also never had a victory, and then Suey Pig had no victory. But I'm not gonna penalize the handicapped pig.
Right, he's playing at a disadvantage.
And he's already struggling from the get-go, and then the Junior was just I mean, everything Junior did was stuck with Mrs. Creepy, so he was he's carrying an anchor around his neck anyway. So.
Exactly. The Rottens were funny because when they won and their cheating failed, but they still won. They were upset that their cheating ways failed them. So they didn't celebrate victory. They were angry that their cheating ways didn't work.
I think one of my favorite moments in this whole series is the point where they get caught cheating and Daisy Mayhem goes off. She grabs a microphone and she's like, next time we're going to come back and we're going to cheat even harder.
She kind of pulls the Kanye West thing, grabs the microphone from Taylor Swift, says, we're going to cheat harder next time. You guys are in trouble. And the Rottens were great because their prowess at cheating knew no bounds. Mm-hmm. When they did the Scotland episode, they had a 3-legged kilt race. The Rottens were awarded negative 75 points in that event because they devised a treadmill they would run along the treadmill and go faster than everybody. They also forged a rule book to pass the use of the treadmill as a valid strategy. And then they falsified the finish line to fool the other teams into thinking the race was already over. So they had a 3-tier approach to winning that race, and they got 75 points taken away.
Yeah, and you can say that Snagglepuss and Mildew Wolf were not impartial color commentators either. They every time there was cheating, they were the ones who called it out. So.
Yeah. And we never see the judges, right? They always talk about the officials or the judges, and you never see them.
Right.
Yeah, they're just this mystery people you never see. You don't know how the scoring works, but who cares? Because it's all funny and it all makes sense at the end of the day.
Exactly.
The Rottens got a 0 score once, so 0 wasn't bad enough. They gave him 2 zeros.
But what I love, what I love is that the Rottens actually win. They get 2 victories out of this. So I mean, this was not a close competition overall. If you're looking at the numbers, I mean, the Scoobies won 14 of the 24 Laff-A-Lympic days. So I mean, they win 14 golds. The Yogis get half of that with 7. And then the Rottens actually pulled off 2, which it was really cool because and it's not until near the end of the second season, so you don't expect it.
Yeah,
and the surprise from Snagglepuss is they actually won.
And there was one tie.
The series ended on a 3-way tie.
Yeah,
on the moon,
which was great. I mean, cartoon physics aside, being on the moon was awesome.
Yeah, between the moon and Atlantis, they pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, from the depths of the ocean all the way to the last frontier, Of course, none of this entertainment would be possible without the actors, writers, artists of this show and everyone who brought these characters to life, which is always really, really cool when you think about types of people and the talent it takes to pull off something like this. There were 45 characters, so this is a big cast. There were 16 voice actors doing all of these characters. Of course, there are some names that everyone will recognize: Mel Blanc, Casey Kasem, Scatman Crothers. Most people recognize Mel Blanc from Warner Brothers. He's Bugs Bunny, right? But he shows up in this, and he does quite a few characters. Captain Caveman, Speed Buggy, he's Barney Rubble. Casey Kasem is Shaggy. Everyone knows that. Which one? I learned that when I was a kid. When I learned that the dude from American Top 40 on the radio was also Shaggy, I could never, for the rest of my life, and even today, hear Casey Kasem on the radio and not picture Shaggy in my head.
Well, and it's funny because as soon as you know that he did like cartoon characters, you can't miss him when you actually for the other characters that he does.
You hear him everywhere.
Yeah, when he's Robin from Batman and Robin. I mean,
Yep.
As soon as you have like, oh, it's Casey Kasem.
Yeah. It's like when you buy a new car, you buy a red truck and all of a sudden you're seeing all the red trucks.
Right.
So, geez, everyone has a red truck. Then when you learn that, oh, that's Casey Kasem's voice, now you hear him everywhere.
He didn't change his voice up much either, because his Shaggy voice sounds the same as when he does the voice of Alexander in Josie and the Pussycats. It's the same voice. It's identical. So,
yeah, but he's Casey Kasem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he can get away with it. There are other, so those are the names of people most people will recognize, even if you're not into cartoons. Mel Blanc, Casey Kasem, Scatman Crothers. But the people you don't know who really did a lot of voices were Frank Welker and Don Messick. And Robert, I know you know more about these guys than I do, but I was amazed when I learned how many different characters those two had.
Well, yeah, and never, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, go into IMDb and look up Frank Welker. There's like 600 plus different animated shows and movies attached to him. He's most probably recognizable as the voice of Fred, the original voice and only voice ever of Fred from the Scooby-Doo show. And Don Messick was the original voice of Scooby-Doo.
Mm-hmm.
So they both worked together, and actually Messick ended up being a bit of a mentor to Frank Welker. So when Messick passed away, after a few years, Frank Welker actually took over as still the current voice of Scooby-Doo. So yeah, I mean, there were staples of that later Hanna-Barbera animation. Frank Welker's everywhere. You can't watch anything animated. He's pretty much attached to it. But
in Laff-A-Lympics, so he was Dino Mutt, Tinker, Jabberjaw, Yacky Doodle, Magic Rabbit, and Suey the Pig. So he was 5 characters just in this show. Don Messick, same, Scooby-Doo, Mumbly, Pixie, Dirty Dalton, Mr. Creeply, Junior Creeply, and Boo Boo Bear.
Yeah, and just a wealth of talent between those two alone. But and then you add in that Dawes Butler and his involvement.
Oh my. He had 10 characters in this show.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, and he was Dawes Butler goes back into the 1940s working with MGM. And then once Hanna-Barbera, the MGM studio closed down, Hanna-Barbera started their own studio. He went with them and he voiced pretty much anybody you can think of. Most of those characters, he did the voice of those. Had a falling out at one point with Hanna-Barbera, left, and Don Messick actually took over almost all those voices.
All of his voices.
Until they patched things up. He came back and stepped right back in and was suddenly doing like he had never left. So
yeah, that's an incredible talent. It always surprises me, that they can do all these different characters and sound, to the learned person, you can hear them kind of, you get it, but there's the characters sometimes are so different from each other. It's like, how are they pulling that off? And then to imitate someone else doing that character and doing it flawlessly, it's amazing. One case in point is with Alan Reed. Alan Reed was Fred Flintstone on the Flintstones show from 1960 to 1966. And when Fred Flintstone showed up on Laff-A-Lympics in 1977, he did Fred Flintstone, Alan Reed, but he only did one episode because then he passed away. And then Henry Corden took over and became Fred Flintstone for the next 3 episodes that Fred was in Laff-A-Lympics, and then Fred Flintstone going forward. And it's really hard to tell which one is which.
This is one of the exciting things working on this show is seeing getting to recognize a lot of these voices and kind of dig into the talent behind all these the voice actors, because there's a wealth of talent in here. And one I'll throw out there too is the Gary Owens as Blue Falcon, which you may not know his name, but you hear his voice and oh yeah, I've heard that voice so many different times. And
yeah, it's the quintessential superhero voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that struck me, and I just appreciated it watching this, is the kind of the geek in me, but looking at those original Hanna-Barbera cartoons, those 50s and 60s cartoons, and that original Hanna-Barbera style, which is very distinct. Like all the animals are they're kind of pudgy and just very kind of similar in their look. but very cartoony. Same with the people are very cartoony, long noses, and and then you get to the late, about I think it was about 66, 67, they started changing their style to more of a comic book, slightly realistic look. When you look at the Blue Falcon, who's very superhero and more
Very humanoid,
more proportionate human, and the Scooby-Doo characters, they just that look changes, and to be able to take those two distinct styles, and of course with the Rottens, they kind of mash them all together in different ways. So all those two distinctly different styles, just they work together. I mean, it's not jarring. It's like, well, that one looks so. It just somehow all still works together on the same screen. It's really cool. It's really cool how they did it.
What we haven't talked about is kind of the nod they give to ABC's Wide World of Sports, where the hosts Snagglepuss and Mildew Wolf are wearing the yellow Howard Cosell blazers throughout, and as a kid, you don't know it, but I'm sure that my parents recognized, oh, that's Howard Cosell's Wide World of Sports jacket, which was great, which would have been even funnier had they had a character who was kind of like Howard Cosell on this thing. Would have been a riot.
It may have worked a little bit better than Mildew Wolf did, actually.
Yeah, he was it was a very interesting combo, him and Snagglepuss.
Yeah, it didn't really work for me. That's maybe one of the weak points to me.
I think they missed an opportunity there to have, this is Howard Cosell, that would have been great.
Or at least,
of course, then you'd have to bring in Muhammad Ali somehow.
But I get the thought behind it. He's got a very distinct voice, kind of like, like a Howard Cosell, like that kind of, but that Paul Lynde voice is very distinct and very unique.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite click for me. One of the few things that didn't work for me in this show, actually. Yeah,
I really enjoyed the Laff-A-Lympics series. It brought back a lot of memories doing the research for this and watching a lot of the episodes. Now it has that patina of age on it, which makes it even more fun. It's looking at the animation and noticing things now as an adult that I didn't see when I was a kid, of all the cultural references, which a lot of that you can't do today, for good reason.
Right. Well, and let's talk a little bit about some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So for you, John, what were the things that stood out for you that was just really made it good?
For me, what made it good, we talked about it earlier, is that bringing all the characters from all these different shows and all these different environments and different spaces together, and they're all hanging out with each other like this is not a big deal for them. They're always together, and they're just these characters, these people that's their job. They do this show over here, but now they're competing against each other, but they maintain character on this. So I loved that it brought all those environments and those characters together in one piece. That was my favorite part of it, for sure.
No, I totally agree with that. That was like, it's such a cool concept, and I thought they pulled it off really well that way. And that ties partly to what I had just said previously too, about the animation styles, distinctly different but still working really well, finding a way to make it all work together very smoothly. I really love that. Yeah, those are good. How about the bad? What did you see that would kind of ping them for the negatives that kind of made it less stellar?
Yeah, so the bad to me are all of the cultural stereotypes that they trample on. Just the fact of having a character named Hong Kong Phooey, probably not a good idea nowadays. And the stereotypes that are perpetuated in some of the episodes are a little cringeworthy today.
I went in, knowing that they're going to all these different locations, and I was bracing myself for some of the worst. I'm thinking, oh, this could get bad. Hurry. And I thought, and part of it's because they went to a location, but they didn't, for the most part, they tried a pretty fine line of not, I mean, they weren't showing people from, they go to Morocco and there's people from Morocco walking around as much. I mean, they were there, and they would take maybe some of the, suddenly they're dumping a bunch of couscous on the ground and things like that. But I was surprised at how not awful that was.
Yes. Yeah. I see your point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a lot of opportunity for that, and they didn't.
Yeah, it could have gone ugly very quickly, but they for the most part avoided that. So
yes,
for me, the bad was really it is kind of a victim of just that Hanna-Barbera animation style, which, I mean, they were at that point, they were cranking out, like I said, so many cartoons on a Saturday for Saturday mornings. They had, and it's one of the criticisms of the studio was that they just had that basically assembly line format. So they would just, a writer would touch it, and then this person would touch it, and they would just like send it down the line. So, and you see that throughout where, I mean, that they would reuse backgrounds, they would do kind of shortcuts to kind of keep things moving and crank them out. And actually, this one doesn't have too many. I know we're going to stumble across a lot of them in other ones, but in this one, the most glaring one is in the intro. So they introduce the teams, and there's the segment where they're showing the Scoobies and Yogis doing the tug of war, and the Creeplies come out of the mud pit in between them, and they cut the rope, and you see the entire Creeply team, and Daisy Mayhem's right there, and for the last maybe 4 frames, she goes from black hair to blonde hair.
Yes.
Like, and this is your title sequence, and you couldn't get the color right.
You would think after the first couple, someone would say, hey, maybe we should check that and just replace that little bit. But
and I watched that, and like the first time I saw it, and I noticed it, and like, wait, did they put Taffy on that team for some reason? But like, no, it was Daisy Mayhem. They just, in that cell, they just changed the color and never changed it out. So for 24 episodes, that mistake is right up front.
Yeah, good enough. We're just going with it.
Should we change it? No, forget about it. Nobody will notice.
Yeah, for me, the ugly were, not that I expected a strong plot line throughout, but there really was just no plot line at all. It was just they're gonna do these crazy competitions. We might introduce the competition, we might not. There may be rules, there may not. We're just gonna see what happens. So the format was there, but it didn't always follow for me. So
yeah, I think for the ugly on my part was actually the amount of cheating that they relied on for the. I mean, you think of the Olympics. The Olympics work really well when everybody's working really hard and competing, and the just being able to win over everybody over the competition is like the thrill of it. And this one, it almost at times. I mean, some of the ways they try to do it was actually really clever and entertaining, but over 24 episodes, and at least 4 events per episode. That's a lot. That's a lot of cheating, and a
lot of cheating. Well, and it wasn't always the really rottens doing the cheating either.
That's right.
Sometimes the yogis would bend the rules, let's say. So yeah, I was surprised, but that would happen too.
Yeah, that was actually a pleasant way. Like, if you're going to do it, it's not just the bad guys.
Yeah, everybody cheats.
The bad guys doing it. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good, bad, and ugly. Is any final thoughts on the Laff-A-Lympics?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Laff-A-Lympics. For the reasons we talked about. It's kind of like a kid in a toy store where there's all the toys are there, right? All the characters are here. And even if they're not doing anything, you got to see them in the background or just as a part of the team. And it was interesting to see that character put into other situations, like imagining how they would react. There's that parasocial interaction where you've watched enough Scooby-Doo that how Shaggy should respond to this type of situation, and they nail it. He responds the way Shaggy is supposed to respond. And that's true for, with some exceptions, all the characters responded the way you expected them to respond in certain situations. So I really enjoy it. This is one of my favorites.
And out of a 10 of a ranking of 10, where would you put it?
I'd put it at, this is our first episode, so I don't want to set the bar too high, but I'm going to go with like an 8, just because they pulled it off. Bringing all these different shows and different types of shows and different styles and bringing it all together. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you really touched on kind of what appealed to me about this show is that as when you're a kid and you're playing with your toys, you've got, superheroes, and then you've got, in my case, I had G.I. Joes and I had Transformers, and they played together. I mean, I would play with them together. They didn't just G.I. Joes just play with G.I. Joes, and never will they cross. It was they would do things, and I would actually, pretend like they're playing a football game against each other and this and that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is like my childhood on a screen, but with the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and that was just, it was so cool.
It's the whole toy box.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it still works for me.
Yeah.
I thought it just that appeal, and I thought, like you said, they pulled it off, and
Right.
it's entertaining and it's funny, and I can speak for my 6-year-old daughter, who was thoroughly enjoyed it. And not only that, she was fully invested, cheering on the Scooby Doobies at every turn. So
Awesome.
she's like her father. She's like overly obsessed with Scooby Doo. So just so having that 6-year-old to be able to kind of to watch it myself and then watch it with her and seeing the way she reacted to it, was like, oh, that's just awesome. It worked for her. So
you get to live it all over again.
Yeah. So I'm right on the same page as you. I was sitting at an 8. I just thought, I mean, it's not perfect. There obviously has dings, but everything put together, especially given that time frame and what they're going for, it's a pretty ambitious project, and it worked.
It worked. Yeah. And it still works.
Yeah.
It would be interesting if there was a, if a studio were to take this up again with modern characters and see if they could pull it off as well. Or is every character so much in its own space that it wouldn't really work? The styles are too different now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, well, I'm glad we agree, because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. This is a good starting point. Absolutely.
Yeah, good one to start with, and more fun to come, right?
Absolutely. We're just getting started. Well, John, I hear the final strains of the Laff-A-Lympics music kind of fluttering in my ear. So that means the Laff-A-Lympics has come to a close, and so does this episode of Toon Talk.
And more fun to come. Next time, we are going to be talking about some characters that started as cartoon shorts, actually Oscar-nominated and Oscar-winning cartoon shorts that I remember seeing at the drive-in.
Yeah, so that means we are turning back the clock to 1965. And we're going to see the debut of MGM's Tom and Jerry on television. And hold on, because there's going to be a fair amount of ugly to dig through when we get into the cat and mouse.
Yeah, there's a lot to dig into there for sure. Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside. So that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter at Toon Talk Guys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.